there is the thought process that things that you think that keep you safe only keep you safe against people that are truly not there to harm you. They are, you know, the thought process that some of these things like stun guns only work on people that have not um, encountered violence and pain and that type of thing. Like my safety is completely dependent on pepper spray, when in reality, that person's so close to you in that encounter that more than likely they're still going to be able to get to you. And then they're going to take out their pain and frustration on you because you did not actually have any skills to back up the pepper spray. It was just you know, a magic button. So we're going to do round two. We voted one person off the island here, so we're down to six. But we're going to continue off where we left off and hopefully get into some interesting conversations. Yep.
So just a quick review yesterday during part one, skills and principle based training versus self defense brought out a lot of experience based opinions. Number two, situational awareness, skill that is taught and learned. It is a common sense or a catch all phrase. Again, a lot of great conversation. Proficiency, performance upon demand, something that also brought us out of our shells a little bit. The bad habits thing, need to unlearn training received in the past, examples why and were they beneficial. That a lot of stuff came out there that I wrote down. I took a lot of notes. So we're going to lead off today with Starbucks questions. Question: intellectuals pose for situations they have no experience, no frame of reference.
All right, so to add a little bit more context to that, running classes, whether you are training people who have a lot of experience in real world scenarios, or you are training those that feel like they know what happens, you get these questions that have absolutely nothing to do with how you would react in a real scenario. And so what you start doing is you start asking about things like, at the point of impact, do the legal ramifications of something dictate how you are going to react to something? And my father created the Starbucks thing because he was like, it really feels like it's two people sitting across from each other with coffee going, I feel that this is how I would react. When an analogy of that would be, you're sitting there at a coffee shop, and then all of a sudden a Bengal tiger walks into the coffee shop. A Starbucks question would be, I wonder how that Bengal tiger got here. No one cares. You are either trying to survive at that moment, freaking out, or pushing your friend over so that he gets eaten by that tiger. There's, and so as you start to build this out, you want to differentiate like what you truly will be doing at all skill levels. Now, there is something to be said about establishing your line, like what you were willing to do well in advance. Like you want to prepare mentally for a lot of different things, and that will differentiate between the legal ramifications. So is that a very important thing to cover? Yes. Like you should understand your what's going to happen directly after an event. If somebody that you love or yourself is directly under attack, are there many scenarios where that has no bearing as far as a question? Yes. And so like you have to identify that. So my question is for Starbucks questions: how does it apply to training? How does it apply to real life? And how can we get people to have a realistic outlook on that? Go.
I think a good stepping off point with that is when somebody understands the why, they'll more effectively embrace the how. Does that make sense?
In particular to what kind of scenarios and what level of training?
I don't think they're asking a real why. They're creating they're creating excuses as to not go down a certain road that they find being uncomfortable.
Okay.
And so it's not a legitimate question of for me, in like a situation, trying to understand the individual's intent in that moment is irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant to the current situation that you're found in. And to try to go down other psychological paths of like, well, why is that person here? Why do they want to do this to me? Why is this happening? That's just me dragging excuses and to create a barrier of like, I don't want to go down this road.
Now that happens a lot, especially when you're not mentally prepared for a scenario. You want to know why that person's doing it because you cannot fathom doing this to anyone else, especially when most scenarios that we try to protect our loved ones in are going to happen from somebody that they know or they feel that they know, that they're familiar with. And so the why are you doing this? Why are you here? You know, I trusted you thought process is this loop that you get caught in that you can't break out of when it doesn't matter. In reality, they are doing this, therefore, you need to do something to survive that scenario. Because at the end of it all, you can then question why were you doing that? But it's just wasting time mentally. You know, and so that's also another reason for the purpose of this question, or this kind of topic. But yeah, I agree with you. How do you get past it? How do you introduce them to breaking past that? Because you know that that's how it is. So you have to introduce them to the violent scenarios that they're going to be encountering, at least potentially encountering, at least so that they can mentally accept it. How do you go from a controlled training environment to the fact that, look, this is probably going to be the most violent, horrific act possible, and you will forever be scarred regardless of how it turns out? How do I introduce that to students in a real world application and training?
That could be a gradual justification and kind of self-awareness from the point of the student. Why did you decide that now was the time to seek a skill that you've never had before, that you may realize that you needed, but until what was the turning point? What was the pivot where you realize that, hey, I may not be prepared for a situation that is a very real world, very possible situation, and from there, talking about their options, their what they're willing to do, how far they're willing to go, probability versus possibility,
Establishing their why.
Yeah, and that's why I believe as a instructor, regardless of what you're trying to convey, why is very important. There's a lot of no, I'm just going to just do it this way. There shouldn't be really any questions. You brought up a perfect example yesterday about somebody that was receiving a lesson and like, I don't really understand why this is so important, why it has to be so extreme. But when you use the context of, well, just because I'm teaching you how to go this far doesn't mean you always have to go that far. And just kind of maybe them being able to titrate their dial from 1 if needed all the way to 10 if necessary.
The funny thing about that is we weren't actually teaching them to go that far. We were just creating a scenario to where it just would keep escalating. And at some point it was on them to determine how to finish the scenario.
It was an option.
It was an option. And even with that being the individual's option, they still ran into a wall, right? Where they found them in waters that made them uncomfortable.
Amber, do you have strategies to get young women or just women in general to accept sexual assault as a possibility of that's what you're training for, self-defense as one of the higher likelihoods of happening? Is there something that you try to break past the old, the whole, well, I'm safe because I travel with multiple girlfriends when I do this, or I wear this as a self-defense, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to get past there sometimes, especially with, well, I carry pepper spray. Okay, well, have you used it? Are you going to be able to access it? Do you even realize that you're in a situation that you need it? For most of what I've seen, it's a progression. You know, there's no special trick or anything. It's those women, and sometimes like teen girls, hearing it from someone who isn't their parents. And this kind of falls into the next topic that I'm sure we'll hit on, but it's really easy to throw off like, oh, dad's just being, you know, way too protective and that kind of thing. But when you start realizing that evil exists in the world because you've heard it from other people, or you've seen it, you know, from other people, you can start kind of moving past that. But I mean, we start when I do like courses that are specifically oriented to women. We typically start with understanding that going into certain social situations, you need to have an expectation for what what is acceptable to you and what isn't. And the time to have those thoughts or conversations isn't in the moment, it's ahead of time, so that you at least have an idea of where the boundary is so that you understand setting it if the time comes.
Can you give an example when you say what is acceptable and what isn't?
I'm talking more like intimacy relationships, knowing, you know, what you're okay with your boyfriend or significant other in the environment you're going to be in, or whatever it might be. Because a lot of times we're talking about teenage girls going off to college and they're in different social situations that they've never been in. They're at parties with, you know, they're co-ed, they're crashing on friends' couches and apartment rooms, and you know, driving with somebody who gets too drunk, and now, you know, how are you getting home? So those are the things to think about ahead of time, and not in the moment when you're tired or maybe intoxicated and now you're trying to figure things out.
So identifying what the difference between predatory mindset and what is normal behavior in those settings, and identifying that the advice given to you by your friends may be pushing you closer towards being in danger versus, you know, for example, oh, it's okay, he's just kind of like that, like this is a normal thing. And it's like, no, that's screwed up. Like
right. I've decided that's not acceptable for me.
Yes.
Like maybe it's normal for you to have that happen, but that's not acceptable to me. And I know that because I've thought of it ahead of time, and I'm setting this boundary, and I have a plan for getting myself out of this situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, different life experiences will give you different meters on that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you know, unfortunately, that's not something you can just impart to somebody. I can't have a 17-year-old girl come into my class and just, you know, me be like, listen, this is how things happen and you need to have this figured out. It takes time, and we hit on it little bits at a time.
Do you have overarching lessons inside of that class where you destroy thought processes? For example, and I understand I'm different because obviously I come off a little bit differently, but you know, like the whole, I travel with multiple girlfriends. I have multiple stories that I can speak on where that obviously has not helped, and in fact it just provided more options for the person that's there. You know, you can do analogies. You know, the wolf does not look over the top of the hill and see a flock of sheep and go, oh, there's too many sheep. They go buffet. Like, there's the thought process that the thing that is going to deter them is, you know, a reason to go back, or self-defense tools. I carry a whistle. Well, you know, the thing is that as a bad guy, if you blow a whistle and I run away, everybody knows that I'm the bad guy. If you blow a whistle and I punch you in the teeth and break your teeth, then in turn what happens is, well, you stop blowing the whistle because you can't blow the whistle anymore. There is the thought process that things that you think that keep you safe only keep you safe against people that are truly not there to harm you. They are, you know, the thought process that some of these things like stun guns only work on people that have not encountered violence and pain and that type of thing. Do you roll that into your class so that it's something where they can think about it, where they're just like, oh, I do fall back on that safety point, and I need to rethink about that. Like, my safety is completely dependent on pepper spray, when in reality that person's so close to you in that encounter that more than likely they're still going to be able to get to you, and then they're going to take out their pain and frustration on you because you did not actually have any skills to back up the pepper spray. It was just a, you know, a magic button.
I mean, we talk about committing to action, and probably one of the biggest things that I focus on is body sponsorship and technique in striking and doing whatever it is you're doing. Whether that's, and I don't encourage any of the self-defense things, but if you feel like you need to have a little caddy or keychain on your thing, like that's fine, but you need to know how to use your body behind it if you're going to try to hit somebody with it. So one of the biggest things I think that people can come out of an ongoing type class is being able to commit your whole body into striking, hitting, whatever it is you're doing, and not stopping until you're able to get away, or whatever that means, right? Because situations are different, but being able to decide that I'm worth protecting and not stopping until you're protected, you're out of the situation, whatever it might be.
Well, what's better? I mean, I have an opinion on this. Escaping or neutralizing a threat. In my opinion, escaping a threat may encourage that person just to find weaker prey. That evil person,
I mean, I don't think I can't really take into consideration if I'm getting attacked, I can't think about, well, I need to destroy this person so they can't go hurt someone else. I have no control over you and what you're going to do and your thoughts and your actions. But for me, for my situation, if I can get enough space because I've hurt you enough or whatever it is to where I can get out and get away, and that's going to be the better thing for me in that moment, great. Now, if it's me with, my 3-year-old niece, well, how fast am I going to be able to get away? Where is safety? Now, what do I need to do to make sure that I make enough space to get away? So it's going to depend on where I am, what's going on, who's around me. Because that's a very different thing than me just worried about you, tomorrow waking up and finding another prey.
Well, I think one of the biggest benefits of training, like what we're talking about, is not necessarily, yes, the being able to defend myself once some violent act is upon me. Yes, I have to be able to have some sort of skills to do that, or some sort of tool. But yes, but I think if we reverse engineer it and back it up some, having training to where, and I'm not talking about like the typical martial arts, well, it builds confidence, blah, blah, blah. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you put people in situations where sometimes they fail, sometimes they win. You progressively add resistance. You progressively add variables to the situations. You put them in scenarios where maybe they just haven't thought about it, they because it's not the world that they live in. And so now they start thinking about these things. They establish some precedents for success because they're developing some physical tools. Maybe they're getting physically stronger, they're getting emotionally more tough. And then by extension, and I mean, I think this is quantifiable. You can't like write it down, but the way that you carry yourself changes. As you develop more confidence in your ability to actually do something, and you're stronger, and you're physically more fit, you're emotionally more tough, you become less likely to be victimized. Just because if I am a predator, I'm not looking for the one that I think is gonna give me significant problems. I'm looking for the one that walks down the street, they look at the floor, their shoulders are slumped, they don't have this presence about them that says, that looks like more trouble than it's worth,
We used the 1 to 10 scale yesterday, or our past conversation. There's a difference between somebody who's operating at a 2 that can go to a 10, and somebody who's operating at a 2 that only has a 4 to back them up.
Yeah. I mean, it can't just be like we talked about, well, I can't truly de-escalate somebody if I don't have the skills to back that up. Right. So it can't just be, well, just walk with your shoulders up back. It can't be that. That has to come from actually having the skills that go along with it. It can't be just fake it till you make it kind of thing. Predators see through that. That's not a real thing. So I think the physical training side of it is important, but if we're not spending a good bit of time talking about, well, how did we get in this situation? You know, what allowed us to get here? And 18-year-olds do dumb shit. Like, that's just the way it is. Like, they do. They're put in situations that completely foreign to them. Now you add chemical enhancements and peer pressure and, you know, environments that are unfamiliar and all these things. And you can see how quickly it can just snowball, go downhill on you. And so,
And there's direct outliers. Sorry.
Oh, for sure.
There's outliers. So just so that anyone watching understands, yes, the average way to combat this is to provide confidence, real confidence. We can talk about the difference between fake and real confidence. But the thing is that there is something to be said that there are predators out there that will completely push past the confidence piece because they find it more of a challenge, and therefore that is their cup of tea.
sure. But I think those are the anomalies. Those are
But
outliers.
correct, right? But that is
That's
you
the
know,
one you're actually concerned about, though.
you know,
In reality, I'm not concerned about the person I ball up on the mat every night.
yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like,
Right,
as
but
an
we're
overarching,
not 18-year-old girls.
and
like,
and then there's
That's a different
right,
scenario altogether.
But there's also that, like, I've from my experience, I use young females as a scapegoat because I don't want to get into the intellectual debate about the fact that if you don't fix it at a young age, it doesn't actually go away. The thought process and the bad habits that somebody creates at 18, I see in 40-year-old women
Sure.
all the time. Like, the thing is that it's still a subject matter where the silly stuff that a 16, 17, 18-year-old girl or boy will say, they are just parroting later on because life has not presented them in any type of scenario where they've learned that that's a bad habit, you know. And it's like, okay, so, you know, you'll get somebody that's been like, I've been partying for, you know, the last 12 years, and basically, you know, I could do anything, be with anyone, and I've never had an issue. And then you'll have one person that goes, I went out to party once and all of these bad things happen, right? And then that's where you get the excuses, you know, that fall back and forth. The job of the trainer is to provide something that allows them to think about it, and whether or not they accept that is on them. Like, it's one of those things, like, you give advice or information and people can do with it as they want. The thing is that my question is, we know that if they haven't had that growing up, because that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about people that are not accepting this. Like, this is a first time thought process. So that means that the parents, good or bad, did not introduce, responsibility as the primary thing. You know, like, it is my responsibility to accept the scenarios that I am in, and that, you know, when I start to do something, I need to look at the consequences. I need to look at the good and the bad of everything. Like, that was not part of the upbringing, or if it was bubbled. And so now what happens is, now you're like, I'm releasing them into the world, and now I would like for them to understand how violent the world is. It is very unlikely that person is going to train any more than they are forced to be in front of you. So the idea that I'm going to have time to speak on the more violent issues that they have to mentally prepare for is probably unlikely. And it is a disservice to not present that before it happens, because you may see them again. And a lot of times you see them, I know me and Jimmy have had this conversation, you see them because they had this naive thought and they just walked into the world and something bad happened. And then they're like, you said this was going to happen, and like, I didn't believe it. And then what happens is, like, I want to train all the time. But now they're mentally scarred. Like, there is an issue with that, you know? And so the thing is that how far do we educate people? And there is a way to do it. Like, it's not like like show them how to skin someone so that they mentally get scarred. And you're like, there are people out there like that. You can talk to people and respect their boundaries and their beliefs and all this other stuff and go, look, they're just bad people out there. And the likelihood that you're going to run into them or at least walk by them is super, super high. And the thing is that this person is not going to stop. So, and you can give examples about like, I want you to stop at the moment that you can get directly away. But you should also identify the fact that if that person is not scarred in some way so that you can identify them, later on, or you have the potential to do great trauma to them and you refuse, it may be something that you don't understand violence. So therefore you don't know how much it truly hurts someone and you fall short. Like we all understand at this table, you always fall short of your training. Like that's just how that is. You train to a certain level, you'll always perform better in training than in real life. So if I aim for just hurting someone, what happens to that person? I probably am going to stun them and then they're pissed off. If I try to maim them, maybe I'll hurt them. If I try to kill them, I'll probably neutralize them. Like the idea of excessive violence is because I understand that I can always de-escalate that. I can drop that down. But I also know that on average, most people, unless you're like Michael Jordan, do not rise to game day, right? Like if you look at Michael Jordan's stats, a lot of times people talk about how he rose to the challenge. And a lot of times if you look at it, it's like, no, he performed the same. Everyone else dropped because of the stress level. And it's like, that's something that we're not talking about professional athletes, but it is a good indicator of what happened. So how much do we talk about it so that they at least understand? That way they can't say, I didn't know.
So you're saying you have 2 hours with an 18-year-old female, and that's probably going to be it. You're going to train them to kill somebody. That way, if something actually happens, they don't actually end up killing them.
What I'm saying is that you introduce the actual violent act so that psychologically they can accept it. In a way,
I think you're asking a lot of an 18-year-old female. The average 18-year-old female. I
yes,
think
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think
The
it's
situation-
I think it's
situation dictates a
counterproductive to
lot,
what you're
though.
trying to do, though.
Counterproductive
Yes,
in 2 hours.
to teach them to try to kill somebody.
I mean,
I
how much
think
time
you
does the
lose-
military spend on that?
About 2 hours. I mean, the thing is that,
And then you go in a stack and you have intel on what's happening and what you're getting yourself
That's
into.
not-
That's the big difference is when you have 2 hours with somebody that will probably not run into that situation, but there is the possibility. And then on the other side, when we trained, it was very probable that we were going to stack and do things that
yeah. And how many times on a mission were you given intel that was completely, absolutely dog shit wrong? Like
Every time.
There's yes. So
There's always something off.
there's always something
Yeah.
weird.
I'd like to start the
But
conversation.
then you have to have training to be able to think on your feet and deal with that.
Well, yeah, so at everybody at this table, some point in our life, some point in our career, we realized that strength and confidence were not enough.
Right.
We had to
Yeah.
have experience in training first, and then experience with said training. And 2 hours is not a lot of time to you can't stuff 5 pounds into 5 pounds of shit.
But here's
into
what I
10
don't
pound,
want. You need the person to understand their why. Like they have to know. They
why.
have to know the why,
Mhm.
right? Because here's what you don't want to happen is show them how to pull a blade and then they pull it and they don't use it and then it gets used on them.
Right.
Like they have to be committed to this. And the
That's-
only way they're committed to it is understanding the why. Like that's it. And then, I mean, but the why can go in different directions. Like if you're a mother and you've gotten yourself into a really bad situation because you've made a lot of mistakes and you came across a predator and you're getting raped. Is your why killing the rapist? Or is it going home to your kids so you can be a mother the next day, a wife the next day, and continue to live? And just go, hey, I made these mistakes along the way. I'm not going to recreate them. Therefore, I won't be there again. Or do you pull a blade that you're not completely committed to because your goal is killing the rapist instead of going home and being a mother and doing whatever? Now that's all of a sudden like determining their intent
Two
along the
different
way, right?
mindsets.
Well, exactly. Well, it starts
Yeah.
with the why though. That answers a lot of questions.
Yeah.
There's also, we have to also remember there's a huge difference between teaching and training. There's also a huge difference in, introducing somebody to subject matter that they absolutely don't have any knowledge on and asking for them to be proficient to deal with it. The thing is that your mind, and nobody disagrees with this at this table, I don't think, that your mind is your number one weapon. Like, that is the thing that is going to get you out of the majority of scenarios that walks in. So when you're conditioning someone, you have to bring up subject matter. And a lot of times when you're talking about this, it is more important to bring up what they will be facing so that they can try to accept it than to say everything's going to be fine. And if you were to train for so many whatever, but they will never do that. It allows them to stay into that little bubble. I have a 2-hour sexual assault awareness seminar, and all it is just lecture, and it's just statistics, and it's all it is just to expose. Look, this is what happens, and I get information on the local area, and their demographics on that way I can identify. Look, this is what's around you, whether you accept it or not. This is what's around you. And the likelihood that it's going to escalate to a certain point is high. So if you can deal with this, one, a scared animal is safer than, one that doesn't believe anything's going on. So even if all I did was scare that person, I know that they're thinking about it. If I piss them off, I know that they're thinking about it. If they absolutely hate me because I showed them stuff that they can never unsee, I have conditioned them a little bit mentally. If they walk away with skills that they need to practice day in and day out on, I did nothing more than the local martial arts school that's down the road. So unfortunately, I in my experience, those are the people in classes that I've had. And you're right, it is an impossible task, but it's still a task that you have to rise to as a trainer sometimes, because that's all you get. And if something happens to them, this is a really, really big pill to swallow that I throw on my own instructors. But it's like, if you had the ability to shock them so that they understand that bad stuff is out there and you didn't, and they are placed in scenarios where they have to have that mindset or at least recognize that this looks like what he was talking about, anything that happens to that person at that point could potentially be rolled back to the opportunity that was there. I don't know what everybody's, beliefs are, but my father, who's a Christian, believed that what happens if that person's in front of you because that's the only time that they're going to be in front of you, and if you withhold information, this goes back to that conversation we had yesterday. And yes, if I know that I have an extended amount of time, should I slow roll it? Yes. And I've done that. I've done that extensively. But, the conversation here is about mindset and understanding violence and all of this other stuff. And so there are times when, like with these guys, dude, man, when I ran the Q course, I had them for an hour and a half. They didn't want to be there. It was in phase 2. They were smoked. They just wanted to go to sleep. The thing is that they weren't listening to me. And I still had to teach them. I still had to force them to do something. And they may never see me again. And at some point in 7 or 8 years on a team, somebody might snatch them up and they got to reach in the back pocket and use that skill that I taught them for an hour and a half. Is that an impossible thing to do? Absolutely. Did we still get reports back that they used what we taught them and it still worked? Yes. So it's like,
but I think there's a difference in, because what you're saying now is you giving a 2-hour presentation. That makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. Fully agree.
That's
a great use of 2 hours.
And
to
honestly,
explain.
if somebody came to me, and I've done this, somebody comes to me, hey, my daughter's going to college next week. Can I get a private lesson? No. There's nothing I can do for her in 50 minutes. Like, he wanted physical tools. Like, I'm not gonna absolve you as a father for not doing your job for the last 18 years. I'm not
Right.
gonna give you that escape. And I'm also not gonna give your daughter a false sense of security in 50 minutes. Now, if I'd sit there for 50 minutes and do a PowerPoint on this is the college that you're going to, this is the things that happen on this campus, these are the things you should be looking for and aware, I'm all in. But to
I would take it in a heartbeat. I would do it in a heartbeat.
You wouldn't.
I wouldn't, and I don't.
And the
I've
reason
turned them
being,
down.
all you need to do is get them to.
There's no all you need to do, man.
Well,
Hey,
there is a
I've
little
been doing this for 20 years. I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of people that we're talking about.
Yeah.
In 50 minutes, I'm not going to give them a physical skill set.
I'm not saying you're going to make them a
That's-
master. What I'm saying is you need to present them with things that they've never thought of before.
Right.
So that way they kind of have an idea of like, hey,
that's what I
this
just talked
exists.
about. I'm not talking about physical tools though.
And then, well, even with that, it's an idea of like, hey, look, what can I give you right now to give you something? And then
A
within
false
that,
sense of security.
well, it's not necessarily a false sense of security. Most things are a false sense of security.
Sure.
The little safety mechanism, like little safety pamphlet on the back of the chair in the aircraft is false sense of security. You're crashing the ground at 500 miles an hour. Like, yeah, put your head between your legs.
Right.
Go ahead. Good job.
So,
So
but I know that.
right, and all this is just asking for what we would do and our experiences, because that is where the value comes from, right? So I will give two things on this. One is, to me, that request is just like you said. Both of you have said this statement during these conversations. The statement is they don't know what they don't know. The thing is that father does not know what he doesn't know. He is asking for something. It's the same thing with commanders. Commanders will be like, this is what I want. And it's like this romanticized version of, what you were talking about, right? Like the everything's perfect. How do they do this? How do they stack for stuff? Second one. But like, all of this other stuff. But like the thing is that you go, yes, sir. And then you teach them and you accomplish the goal that they want, but you understand that to accomplish that goal, since it's fake, you can technically say I checked that block with very limited time that's placed in there. But then you are actually providing training that benefits them because you know about their unit, you know about what they're supposed to do, you know all these things. So in that example, it would be sure. And then when she's in front of you, you're taking the major points of the 2-hour block that you believe is beneficial, and you are passing that on to mentally prepare her. And you are also giving her physical skills so that they couple. But most of that information that's passing on is through the information of speaking to her and mentally preparing her. I'll give a actual example. And I understand that it's really, really, it's not right to use examples like this as proof in any way because they're outlying scenarios, but they are good examples to go, if we didn't agree to do this, then it could have been a different outcome. Jimmy can attest to it because he was in the area when the legal problems happened, which talks about the legal problems. My father knew a former student. He had a daughter that was going to college. She was going to college in California. 1 day of training on the beach, because it's cool, train on the beach. And he had the ability to train her. She didn't want to train. She had this romanticized version of the world, as they do. And in turn, what we normally do is we talk about the psychological aspects of, doing that deed. We give them knife stuff. The reason we teach knife is because of the intimate and violent nature of it. And it makes you think about whether or not I could do that. All that was taught to her was what we call a flow drill, right? And all the reason you do flow drills is so that you understand movement of a knife, not insulting anybody's understanding of that concept. And she learned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all my father had, and I jumped in, was rep that over and over and over and over. And that's it. And that was for a few hours. This young lady went to college. She was in California. She found a local bar, and she found a young gentleman that was there. And she did everything technically right. She got to know him. She dated him in safe places over an extended period of time, probably 5 or 6 different dates. In turn, they felt comfortable with each other. One time he goes, hey, look, instead of going out, can I invite you to my place to cook dinner for you? You can talk about situational awareness and talk about the fact that that wasn't smart, but over a month, 2 months of getting to know someone and talking for hours upon hours, it is really, really difficult to ask for somebody to be like, yeah, don't ever go anywhere near their place. He's cooking for her. She's eating. She wakes up. When she wakes up, he's inside of her. And what happens is she pushes him away. She's completely messed up mentally because she's just woke up from a drug. She finds where her pants are. She grabs the knife and she does the flow drill. According to her, it was the only thing that she could think of. Technically, because it's the only thing she knew. What happened was he scrambled downstairs. She grabbed her stuff, walked downstairs. He kind of recovered, stepped in front of her, and then she did the flow drill again. At this time, he punctured major areas of the body, and he died right at that moment. She then walked out. Now, she was in jail because it's California for an extended period of time. We did everything that we could to try to get her out as quickly as possible. At the end of it all, which was a really long time, it came to light that he had done this to multiple women, like 5, 6, 7 other women. And they all said that by the time that they had woken up, that he had completely raped them. And, there was just no way to prove otherwise because everyone had seen them together. They were dating. There was texts. There was a history. And so they weren't able to go to law enforcement and claim anything outside of that. In that scenario, it falls under this thought process. It was talked about. It was like shell shock. She found herself in a really bad scenario. Is she psychologically scarred? Probably, but had she not had that training, would she have survived? Well, probably, because it seems like he had no violent intent. Does that mean that they did the right thing, even if they woke up? Absolutely. Whatever you do to survive that scenario is the right decision. But the information that was given to her was utilized. Was it enough? Did she have false confidence? Absolutely. But the thing is that somehow it was placed upon her to carry the knife. She was forced to a class that she didn't want to be at, so she probably wasn't listening. I remember the attitude. The thing is that that's just one example of multiple over the years. Like, we both have decades of experience training. And the thing is that you can use both. I would love to have the opportunity. It just seems that you get more opportunity to spend a lot of time with them. And so you can mentally condition them. And you're also talking about you are overcoming issues with the parents.
Yep.
Right. So that's the thing about, I trained kids for a long, long time. And I used to have to lecture the parents. Look, my 2 hours with your children are not going to override your 22 hours of just no discipline. Right. Because they would ask, they'd be like, you just look at them and they get online and they act like you're going to hurt them. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I threatened to cut their arms off and stuff. And
they want you to fix them.
Yeah. And they're like, well, that's funny. I was like, no, it's actually, they believe that I'm going to do that because every single time I gave them a penalty, I actually backed it up, and it was a small penalty. So they think that the big penalties actually are going to be enforced. Right. And so there's this whole thing. But anyways, it's not about saying what's right, what's wrong. It's just that, you're trying to identify, can you do certain things? Can you push the envelope in a certain way and not completely destroy their ability to train? Is it possible? And you have a successful business. I'm not saying anything, outside that. I'm just trying to, that's what I want these conversations to be. I really, really enjoy this. I enjoy the different experiences, because what happens is we can all talk about. Now, you also have a demographic that I know for a fact I couldn't do what I was doing, right? And there's a lot that plays into that. Right. You're look, I'm in Charlotte. And if you did what you just talked about, what also plays into that? The father was a military guy. You know, and so there's that. What plays into my sexual assault awareness classes where I have them do hands-on. You know why I don't do just lecture? Because I get really, really nervous standing in front of nothing but women, just talking down to them. Because you're usually on a pedestal, you're talking down to them, and it's like that's just a real bad way. I've seen my father it go bad with my dad, and you know, I remember looking at it going, I will never do that. I will never stand in front of women and come anywhere near that thought process that I believe. And I've seen him get just cursed out by a group of women at the same time, and it's like that's not good. So what I did was I cheated it, and I threw the lecture inside of hands-on. That way I can have them practice. I can have them beat me up. I can yelp. I can act. I can, you know, break the ice a little bit. But it's a different way of doing it. So
I'll generally start the conversation really early, going back to kind of the beginning of this conversation. If somebody comes to me and wants to train, I tell them at the moment of impact, once you get touched or grabbed or whatever, I don't care why you're doing it. I'm responding to what you're doing. And to get around the morality thing where I don't think I could do that to another person, I'm not walking around stabbing people.
Right.
You're attacking me. That's creating that response. So developing that, we also go into a lot. When my kid was really young, I started training with a knife at a very young age. By the time he was old enough to where I felt comfortable for him to go to the toy section in Walmart by himself, he carried a pocket knife and knew how to use it. Just because at the end of the day, I tell a lot of people, if you go to an instructor and they're like, size doesn't matter, all you need is technique, run away. You know, at the end of the day, now, you know, he was 5 or 6 when I started letting him, you know, go do little things, you know, by himself with me at a short distance away. Now he's 13. He's strong. He's well skilled in all areas of martial arts and training, firearms, knives, all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, I still tell him, you're 120 pounds. You can have all the skill in the world. If an adult comes over and just smashes you in the head, you need a force multiplier. You know, that's why I really believe that, you know, it's almost acceptable, you know, anywhere in the country to carry a pocket knife with you. And that's why it doesn't alarm anybody if you walk in, you know, depending on where you go in the country, like here, people walk around open carrying firearms, nobody cares. You know, you go to California, like the whole world's going to flip out if they think you have a gun. But even in California, you could carry a pocket knife everywhere you went. And just getting people to understand that reality of, you know, if I get, you know, 100-pound person, male or female, and I'm like, hey, if I train you for 10 years, give you all the skills in the world, a 250-pound parolee who will go to extreme violence immediately is going to just pummel you in a hand-to-hand type situation. If you don't have some type of force multiplier, then you stand very little chance of getting out of that situation. And that's a hard pill for people to swallow. People have been like, I've done jiu-jitsu, you know, I'm a black belt in all these martial arts. I've trained all these years. I know all these things. I do this, like, I tap out 250-pound people on the mat. Okay, you're fighting under rules, and you know, you're not on concrete. You're not, you know, you don't have somebody that has zero respect or zero care for your safety. You know, and a lot of people, you have to quickly introduce that type of mindset, so that they understand that this isn't the sport. This isn't me training in the gym with my buddy. This is somebody that really wants to hurt or kill me.
Hey, it's another conversation piece, but you know who's also really, really bad about this? Is people who are trained.
Mm-hmm.
People who are trained that are capable believe all sorts of weird shit about themselves. Like, the fact is that there are times when you are mentally, physically just destroyed. Now, I know everyone at this table is superhuman. That never happens. Like, you are never not situationally aware. Like, you know all dangers around you at all times. Like, even when you're sleeping, like, you absolutely know what's going on outside your house. Like, the thought process that there's any human that walks around that is like that all the time, that is not absolutely insane at some point because they have mentally capped out their, like the whole thought process of being vigilant all the time, the sheepdog waiting for something to happen. Like that's where you mentally break. But anyways,
It happened last night in the mat.
yeah,
He said something to me, and I had to it took me a second to register.
Yes,
I
'cause-
think
'cause
he's
there's-
talking to me, and I was like,
Well,
huh?
yeah,
Let's
there's,
say it again.
there's a stress point. But we mutually know someone who was a female that legitimately could beat up guys. Seen it, watched it, black belt level, jiu-jitsu, MMA, probably would have been a rising star. Not going to go into the complete story, but her head got bounced off of concrete. And in turn, she got taken into a closet. And for the next 2 days, bad things happened to her. And she survived it. And the thing was that her whole point was that with all the skills that she had, she could not stay awake long enough for her to even do anything. And her physical state was completely demolished by that one thing. And the consistency of what happened. And she kept grabbing towards her pants because she knew that there was a knife there. But she would realize that she didn't bring the knife because she was on vacation, and she didn't want to have a knife on her because it reminded her of what she did on a regular basis, and therefore there was not a force multiplier there. And so in that scenario, it has nothing to do with insulting capabilities. It just has to do with, look, this happens. This happens to people that are amazing. And the thing is that they're not stories that are meant to scare people. They're just stories to be like, look, we're all human. We all make mistakes, and if we have the ability to, we should at least present lessons that have been learned really hard through the hard way, so that you don't have to, and so, where do you take that from that point?
I think it's important still though to know that knife or the weapon is not magic. I mean,
Oh, of
it's
course.
I'm glad she maybe didn't have the knife on her, or that dude, whoever was doing this to her, maybe already had it at that point. Like you can arm the other person easily, but also if your only reliance is that force multiplier and you don't have a method to get to it, to use your 10 years of training to access it, and you can only focus on getting to that weapon, you're probably taking a beating trying to grab at it too. I mean, there's a dichotomy to it.
There is.
So if I have the open
sure
hand
that
skills to do something,
talking,
that
I'm
helps
sure,
too.
I'm sure she would have wanted the option to not have 2 days happen to her, but the thing is that that's the mindset. That's your choice, isn't it? Like the choice is I carry a pistol all the time, and the thing is that when I'm not carrying a pistol, I'm always carrying a knife. And the thing is that I understand that by doing so, I'm bringing a weapon to the table that may not be mine. Like this is not loyal to me. If you take this away from me, you can shoot me in the face with my own pistol. As embarrassing as that is something that I accept. And the thing is that there's that whole part of that I walk in with, right? But I also do know that if you're a bad guy and you bring a pistol, there's a lot of scenarios where my ninja skills just aren't going to work.
Yep.
So I would rather have that, but I'm not taking that option away from people, for that. It's just something that we talk about. But
I think a big part of it too is just understanding there's levels of violence. So I mean, just recently, Leandro Lowe,
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like one of the best ever to ever do jiu-jitsu. Gets in a fight with a guy, just controls him, doesn't hurt him, just
Lets him
uses
go.
his skill, lets him go. Guy comes back and kills him in the same night. Because he embarrassed him rather than stopping him or doing something that he definitely had the ability to do. He just chose to use a lower level of force than.
I mean, we could do stories and stories all day
Right.
long. I trained a young lady that when her husband came back from a 12-month deployment, they went out to the Big Apple in Fayetteville.
Oh,
And what happened was she was a very capable girl. She came to every self-defense class. I trained her for like 8 months straight. But she was one of the young ladies that liked to put color in her hair. And she had she had really long hair, and she had done it up. She came to self-defense that night, and she had purple streaks in it, and she looked great for her husband. And they were going to go out because she was going to pick him up, and they went to the Big Apple. And at the same time that he came back from deployment, 82nd Airborne came back from deployment, and they didn't bring dates, but they started to talk to her in a way. And what happened was they told her the things that they were going to do. And then what happened was they all got kicked outside. And while they were curb stomping him, they were choking her and talking about all the things they were going to do to her after they stomped him to death. She used techniques that were provided to her in the classes. She ripped the groin, stepped out, pushed him away, ran away. Went to the truck, grabbed the 45, put 2 rounds directly into one of their chests, and then shot another one. And in turn, what happened was it all dispersed. She went to jail. She went to prison. Like, so the thing was that that was premeditated. It was, she left the scene. She was completely gone from that, but she would have done it again. Like, her husband was in a coma for months after that. And the thing was that they weren't going to stop. And so, like, there's a lot to be said about that. Like, there's a lot of things that fall into that. But, you know, you are presented with these things, and it's like, who would have thought? Like, it's not something that you feel like you're walking into. But, you know, there is no right or wrong with that. Like, I don't know. Had she not gone to the training, and, you know, would she not be in? I don't know. Like, that's not my job to do that. But she did come for a skill. That's all she trained in. It's just another one of those stories. We could probably talk about this for hours and hours and hours. I'd like to kind of like move on to some other topics, if everyone's cool with it.
Right. That's a great segue into mindset training of those you love. We just talked about, you know, particularly that you're out with your wife, you're out with your significant other, your children, you're, you know, based on their level of training.
Right.
My 5-year-old son, your
Right.
13-year-old, you know, cage fighter, you know.
And he's not normal. Let's
let's
put
make sure
this
that we
on the
understand
table.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Mel-
not
Melinda is homeschools,
Yeah.
right? And she's worse than him, right? So like it's why she's not here, you know. But the thing is that that environment has violence, weapons handling, safety, mindset, like just born into that young man when he was born, right? So that is not a normal family dynamic, right? We're not telling you to give a knife to every 5-year-old walking around.
Correct.
But we are also identifying the fact of like, hey, really, what are you going to teach a child that's going to confidence, being able to speak up, you know, understand, like one of the things that we talk about is, you know, saying yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. It is not just about respect. It identifies that that person is a stranger, and therefore those that are around them here. You don't talk to someone that you know intimately by going, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. You don't do that at the distance. You don't put your hands up and go, I don't know you. Like,
Right.
the thing is that there's reasons why certain things are talked about, you know, and we can get into the family stuff, but on that,
So yeah, what are the differences between a normal husband, a normal wife, assuring that their family is prepared to deal with some of the things that we talked about here, as opposed to the very loyal student, you know, patron of that's been to every single seminar, has every one of your videos memorized? What's the difference between those two?
can you train your wife?
Well, we have hundreds of, well, the wife trains that the husband doesn't, or the husband trains but the wife doesn't, you know. We have plenty of couples that train also, but it's much more one or the other. And so this is a question that we get a lot, man, you know, how do I get my wife to, or how do I get my husband, because we have plenty of those too, how do I get my husband to, like,
Realize he doesn't just innately know how to
Right,
fight.
right, just because something's going down, he doesn't know
Right.
anything. Like, or kids, like, what do I tell my kids to do if something's about to go down? And I think it depends, right? Because having a 3-year-old kid is not the same as having a 14-year-old kid.
Right.
Like they're both kids, but it's
Yeah.
not the same. Like a 3-year-old is going to be attached to you.
Yeah.
You know, something's about to go down. That 3-year-old is going to be a hindrance. Really, they're going to be
Right.
hugging around your leg. They're going to, you know, whatever. And while one of the things we talk about is while it may make more sense for, let's say something's getting ready to go down, and we talk about, you know, if your kids know what to do in the event of a fire, they should know what to do in the event of a violent encounter is about to go down, right? There should be a plan. They should everybody in the family should know, all right, if I say this word or this phrase, y'all's job is to get the fuck out of here and let me handle it.
Yeah.
You know, and if I take an ass whooping that day, that's fine, but that's my job. That's the role I took on. Your job is to get everybody else
Safe.
out.
Yeah. Right.
But that's easy to say if, let's say it's a mom and her 14-year-old son. How many 14-year-old boys do you know they're going to leave their mom to deal with a potentially violent encounter?
Right.
So while logically we could say, well, you're 14, you weigh 105, it'd be much better for me if you would just run and go get me some help.
Right.
You know, 14-year-old boys don't think logically.
Right.
And so I think we have to recognize that, well, they're probably not going to run off and go get help. They're probably not going, like, they're going to stay. So if we acknowledge that, then okay, then now what? You know, so we have to have a plan beyond.
Yeah, realistic.
Yeah.
Right. It has to be right. And if it's a 3-year-old, well, I'm gonna now have to fight while being attached to a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just the reality. Like you can't chuck them away and like. I mean, that just
But
is
you
what it is.
could.
Yeah.
This actually like threw up a really important topic that I had. I want to come back to this, but
Mhm.
do you believe that there's levels of violence that you jump to just because of the inability to play around? You know, for example, if I came up to you and I messed
I'm
with
gonna
you,
hit you right in the jaw.
Right, you know. But the way that you would
And
deal with me would probably be different if you say had a 6-year-old daughter, like the de-escalation,
Yes.
the allowing me to get close to you, the transition to a weapon in a violent
Right.
scenario, like
100%.
okay, so like there is
100%. And I talk about
the
this like
spectrum.
I if I'm on my own, I'm probably much more likely to give somebody a little bit more
yes,
leeway.
Yeah.
Right.
If I'm with my daughter, I can't afford that.
Correct.
It's just I am going to jump at those levels
Right.
much faster.
Yeah. It has nothing to do with them attacking your daughter. It has to do with like if she gets bumped,
Right.
like that could be
Right.
something that could just
And if I take an L that day, then I have no control over what happens to her now.
correct. Yeah.
So yeah, I wholly believe that's a real thing, and it should be. Yeah. If I recognize that there may be a potential problem, if it's just me, I may be more willing to kind of play that out and see. If it's me and my daughter, I'm going to escalate much faster, or I'm going to try to preempt much faster.
Right.
I'm going to try to take control much faster, or leave much faster if that's an option.
Yeah.
So with that thought process, does that transfer also to levels of skill and capabilities?
Yeah.
Right. So like if somebody is 300 pounds walking towards you, and then what happens is you're like, you know, as the instructor, that they don't have enough skill to just play that one out.
Right.
Do you talk to them? Because I do. I'm like, hey, like if something happens, you need to go like 0 to 10, like not 10, like killing them, but like 0 to 10, like immediately, because you don't have the ability to mess around, dodge something, be like, hey, sir, please don't do that, demonstrate skill, because the only thing, especially when you're talking about smaller individuals, in ambushes, the only thing that actually is of your benefit is that they didn't think that you were this person.
You've got some
Therefore,
element of
Yeah.
the
surprise.
surprise is what you're looking for. So surprise, violence of action, keeping that on top of them. So it does transfer to, you know, that same thought process.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. And we spend a lot of time on pre-contact and preemption.
Right.
On you know, almost and obviously it depends on why we're in this situation and what the range is that we're dealing with, but almost like to a point where I kind of draw them in and lower their guard and kind of raise their ego a little bit.
Yeah.
Exactly like what you're talking about. Kind of get that element of surprise. I'm talking to them. I'm my verbiage is to de-escalate, but it's also, if that fails, to set them up
Right.
for the
Circling,
the shot.
right.
You know,
Positioning yourself so that you understand. That's one of the things that comes up with like multiple attackers and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's like I circle to this side, or I do this, and it's like, well, I get that, but a lot of that is understanding your environment where multiple people are technically only one person, because or if you have two people and you take out one person quickly, then that becomes one-on-one.
Right.
There's a lot of that
there's no real fighting multiple people.
Right.
I'm fighting one person
Mhm.
multiple times,
Right.
but like I can't. If you three
Jump.
guys come up,
Yeah.
yeah, right. It's not gonna be the John Paul
Right.
jump, split, kick. Yeah,
we have not leveled to that
yeah. I don't
Yeah.
have that.
But like you talked about, my family dynamic is different because, when I met my wife, she had been kickboxing for 10 years. So we've all been together. That's a way of life for us.
Right.
Yeah, the difference.
But my mom, she doesn't train necessarily. Like I take her shooting and stuff. She had, I went a while back and she was like, oh yeah, I have a gun in my nightstand. And I went and it's this freaking dirty, hairy, freaking 44 Magnum. And I was like, you're going to break your wrist. Or
your face.
Yeah. I was like, so I was like, hey, let me help you out. So I took her, we got her just a Glock 19. I was like, this is something you can control. I can put 20 round mags in it. If you're going to use something for home defense, I'd rather you have something like this. Yeah, that's going to make a big boom and the flame's going to come out the end and everything else. But
It's a deterrent.
you're only shooting.
Yeah, you got that one
Yeah.
shot.
You're only shooting once at the max. You got 6 rounds in that thing. So, but
Good land. She was only going to need that
right.
one.
Yeah. So for her though, I talk to her a lot. We go to the range. She's fairly good with a pistol, and every time I go see her, we'll go to the range and train. But I talk more about mindset with her because I have a little brother that has some disabilities, so she needs to take care of him. So I just showed her tactics and mindset, angles in the house. Okay, his room's here, your room's here. This is going to be your field of fire, so you're not going. I'm like, rounds go through wall, and just things that people don't normally think about. If somebody comes to my, if you give somebody, somebody goes and buys a gun, never trains with it. Somebody comes to my house, I'm going to shoot them. Well, let's go through walls. Where are your kids? Where's the rest of your family?
That's what my wife and I spend a lot. We do some hard skill work
Right.
as well. She normally always has a blade on her.
Yeah.
Sometimes she has a gun, but that's usually the harder one to get her
Right.
to carry. But we spend a lot of our time in discussion.
Yeah.
And just trying to expand that orientation.
Yeah.
And the willingness piece.
Right.
And trying to identify what have I not thought about yet?
Yeah.
Where
Right.
whether it's because it's uncomfortable or I just haven't thought about
Right.
it. So that way when the situation does arise, should it, at least it's been discussed.
Right.
And it's not completely foreign.
And we
It's somewhere it's been in
Yeah.
here and even talked about.
And again, everybody's at the table said, we discussed, I discussed with my mom layers of protection. She grew up in Mississippi at a time where you didn't need to lock your doors. Nobody was breaking into your house. I'm like, this is not that time.
And some of it doesn't
And
even
we're not
pertain
there
to
anymore.
violence.
Yeah.
Some of the discussions don't even pertain to
Right.
violence with us. Some of it's I'll ask her simple questions of when I'll leave in the morning or something, what do you do when I don't come home today?
Yeah.
What's your next step?
A good way to progress with that, when you're talking about the mindsets of different families, bands as opposed to
Right.
yours,
Yeah.
mine right now. I have to take a very, very gradual approach with my family, because of the pre-existing mindset, and I try to. We live in a pretty safe area,
Right.
but to make a student, regardless of whether it's your wife, your son, somebody on the mats in front of you on the range, it's to detach them from societal norms and make them realize, we're not preparing for what you already see. We're preparing you, and we're not desensitizing. That's a rather aggressive way of putting it. We're preparing you for what you may see.
Right.
Because if you come to me, you're one of these guys for advice, or it's advice for me. You guys are the core of some pretty heavy background instructors, right? But they've come to you realizing that, hey, they've reached that moment that we just talked about, that I'm not prepared for this.
I do a lot of active shooter training for schools, and teachers in general are like, I've had teachers tell me, like, I just don't want to think about that. I was like, well, if you've never thought about what you would do in that situation, she's like, it's just a lot of emotion. I'm like, I get it.
Yeah.
That's
good.
it is.
That's good. Yeah,
I'm like,
that's
but
great.
if you've never thought about it, you're not going to come up with a great plan in the moment.
You don't have to like it.
Right.
This doesn't have to be something you enjoy doing.
Guess
You know.
what? Guess what you're doing right now?
Yeah.
You're thinking about it.
Exactly.
Guess
Yeah.
what? You're a little bit safer.
It's a good thing.
So on that topic of training your family, I think you guys fall into the same. I won't assume anything. I started before me and my wife, started dating. She was a student of mine, so it's not fair to go, can you train your loved one in that environment? Because it's like, obviously there's an established understanding there. So obviously, if I were to answer the question, the answer would be yes, of course I could train my wife, but that's not fair. My father took a different approach with me. He never believed that you should train your family. He believed that you should, for me, he sent me to world champions to be trained. And then he made sure that he agreed with the way that they trained me, and then just saw it from the outside, right? I still hold that thought. I still hold the thought that if you had the choice, that you would have someone that you respect train your family, because there's just too much emotion involved to your spouse or your child or whatever. You expect way too much out of them. You cannot see them for the skill level that they truly are at. And so you put too much pressure on it, and it adds a dynamic to your relationship that's just undue stress. And so that's the what I usually advise to people. And depending on the people that were on the table, it's JN would talk about his frustration with Rachel, the colonel that was here earlier in the week, and he'd be like, I have answered the question that Rachel's about to ask you, and I know that I was right. And she would ask, and in front of him, I would answer. And Mike would be like, I said that. I literally said that word for word. You know why? Because he has answered that question so many times in front of me. I knew exactly what he was saying. And she would do that thing. She'd be like, well, it's the way he says it that makes it sound like it's truthful.
The messenger matters.
Yeah, and so there's this back and forth, but it's just like, look, if you have the ability to, you find somebody of mutual respect, you just let that pass on. Now, there are definitely times where you have no choice. Like, you're just like, look, I'm not going to have somebody raise my child in this environment. So there is that part that's applied. Is that the same dynamic and same thought process?
Well, I mean, so my son has grown up in this world.
Mhm.
Like, he's never not known this. But I don't train him. Now he'll jump into a coach course that I'm teaching or something like that from time to time, but he takes his jujitsu from Eli Knight and from Anthony Cortapella, and he trains with really good people that I know and have good familiarity with, but I'm not training him for all the reasons you just stated.
And we see that like a good bit where we'll have like a really good instructor who knows how to teach, and they'll bring their significant other in for a class, and they'll come take like a class with them, and I go over and he's like, your hand has to be at this angle, at this height, 3 inches, and I'm like, you know how to teach, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, one,
And you
this
can
person
see, you can
isn't
see the
like,
wife's getting annoyed. You can
Yeah.
see that, and it's like, so yeah, I agree with you on all of that. And I think I'm right here. I can train her, but we can't train together.
That's
Like,
true.
like we can't roll, we can't spar, we can, but there's
There's
not
time
productive.
limits on
it's
it.
not productive.
Yes.
It's
It
going
can
it's doing
deteriorate
really
quickly.
really well until it's not.
Right.
And then so
You take it home.
So yeah, I think overall it's diminishing returns. Like it's just not. I don't think it's beneficial to all.
Yeah.
You know, just from and for most of the reasons you said, you're going to be hypercritical. You know, not well intentioned,
Right.
but hypercritical. You know,
That's why I try to turn it into a game.
Yeah.
I try not to make it where it's like something too serious, like even though the subject matter is
Yeah.
serious. So like with my wife, a lot of it's just coaching cues, just reminders of like things we talk about and discuss.
You guys are not normal either. So
Right.
It's a
Yeah,
lot.
it was like,
Well, I think
like
there's
my
difference
3-year-old, for example, like him in jujitsu, like I help with the class. There's a coach that teaches, I assist him. But at home, I don't do jujitsu with my son.
Yeah.
Like every now and then he wants to like wrestle around or something, and I'll like put him in a position and just like
Right.
throw out little coaching cues and stuff. But the goal with him is like, because again, I get really obsessive with stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just make sure he's having fun.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Turn
He's
it into
30.
a game.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's not like, hey, we're gonna go home. You weren't good at this. We're gonna rep this out. Like, no. Like, oh, you wanted to tackle me?
Yeah.
Oh, as the tackle, you wind up in side control, and I said side control.
Well, see,
He's
my
like,
son,
yeah,
my
I
son's
side control,
19,
you know?
and I started my first training center the year he was born.
Mhm.
So he's never known anything else, but I never pushed it on him. He really didn't start training until he was about 14, 15.
Yeah.
He was always around it, but I never was like, yo, you got to be in class.
Yeah.
Because I didn't, by the time he was 10, I didn't want him to hate everything
Yeah.
about what we
Right.
did,
Yeah.
you know? And now like it's a daily part of his life, but he made that decision.
Because he wanted
You know,
to.
yeah, right. And he's really good. Like, and it's not because of me. Like he's,
Right.
but he's one of these new age jujitsu people. He's inverting all the time, and you know all this rubber squid
Don't ask me
inverted
about that stuff.
triangle, like all this 10th planet
His back will
stuff.
send him back to
Like
basics. in a
he'll,
few
he'll,
years.
he'll say something. I'm like, I don't know
Yeah.
what that is. Like, I have no clue,
Yeah. You know how to stop all that? Good basics.
man. I tell him all the time. Look, when I started jiu-jitsu, there was open guard and closed guard. Like that was it. There was nothing
When I
else.
started jujitsu, they didn't have names for everything.
Right.
Yeah.
We just called it a sweep.
Well, now you'll see like 40 names for the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
But somebody will come out with a new video on it.
Yeah.
It's marketing.
Didn't you?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
I gotta
Yeah.
put my brand on it.
Yeah.
That's right.